Please join me in Gassho. In the Nirvana Sutra, from which Shinran quotes extensively in his major work, Kyogyo Shinsho, the following inscription appears in raised text on the front and back of the bronze bell in a single vertical line. All things lack permanence. This is the law of birth and death. Extinguish birth and death. Cessation leads to bliss. Praise Amitabha, Amida Buddha. Praise Avalokiteshvara, Kanan Bodhisattva. We vow to confer our merit on all beings equally. May one and all attain awakened mind and be born in the land of bliss. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namandos. 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 So good morning and Happy New Year. Thank you. And I won't even try to say it in Japanese. Camille did it so nicely, I will slaughter it, so I will defer to Camille on that. So again, Happy New Year. Last month we had our annual San Francisco Interfaith Council Interfaith Breakfast. And the Interfaith Council was founded 30 years ago, and actually Reverend Sasaki was one of the founding members of that organization. And we always have the winter shelter, which is where all the participating temples and churches provide hot meals to those folks living on the streets during the coldest months of the year, from February to March. Sometimes that's extended to April. And so we have this annual fundraiser to raise funds to provide toiletries, bedding, etc., during those months that we host the Interfaith Winter Shelter. And so the Interfaith annual Thanksgiving breakfast, as I said, it's a major fundraiser, and political leaders and faith leaders from all over the Bay Area, San Francisco, come. And it's a diversity of faith traditions which share their prayers and their aspirations. And the breakfast always begins promptly at 7 and ends by 9. And each year, I've been invited to begin the breakfast with the ringing of the inking. And actually, Reverend Kobata started this, I think, almost 8 years ago at this breakfast. So I offer a few words, and this is what I said, and then I hit the bell. In my Buddhist tradition, the Japanese inking, or handheld bell, is traditionally struck to signify the beginning of quiet sitting. This bell of mindfulness is inviting us to let go of any chaos that may have arisen from any struggles or stresses having occurred earlier this morning. Or maybe letting go of dwelling on what's in store when we arrive to work later this morning. The bell's bright, full sound beautifully counterpoints the stillness of sitting, calling us back to this unrepeatable present moment. And then I strike the bell 2 times, and that begins the Interfaith Council breakfast. So bells have a long history in Buddhism. The kancho, which we heard this morning, the large calling bell, which is struck at the beginning of each service. It hangs outside, and it was rung to let people know in the towns and in the fields that service was happening in their temple. And of course, there's also the ritual of striking the bell 108 times, which we did last night at the conclusion of our New Year's Eve Joy IA Metta service. 108 represents the worldly desires and delusions which contribute to the pain and suffering of this world. The desires are symbolically acknowledged and removed when the bell is struck 108 times. In Japan at midnight, people listen to Joya no Kanno bells, which ring out the new year and ring in the new year, Buddhist temples across the country. Sensei just told me last night that his daughter was telling him that a lot of the neighborhoods are getting upset now that people are ringing their bells at midnight, and so in some areas people are ringing them earlier, which I think is interesting. It shows how things are changing, right? Nothing is stagnant. Nothing stays the same. So we have to adapt, and I thought that was interesting, though. But I think the true significance of ringing the kancho at the year's end is self-examination. And self-examination or self-reflection is a fundamental aspect of Buddhism. We also have the inking, the small bell struck before and after quiet sitting, or to indicate a transition, as we heard Reverend David use this morning in his aspiration. The Buddhist bell also serves to remind us of two fundamental teachings, that of impermanence and interconnectedness. We can all hear and appreciate the sound and tones coming from the bell. That's our interdependency. And yet the sounds are transient, impermanent, lasting only for a fixed amount of time. Kind of like our life, yeah? Profoundly interdependent and yet preciously impermanent. One of my favorite stories takes place in the 15th century, and it involves Renyo Shonin. And I shared this at Mr. Kashiwagi's memorial, so if you've heard it already, I apologize for that. But I think it's just a wonderful story that illustrates our profound impermanence and precious interdependence. So Renyo Shonin was the 8th Gomonchu of our mother temple, the Honganji. And he once found a piece of paper that was trash in the hall of the Honganji. And he picked it up and asked, "Who wastes this precious gift?" He was not looking at the fact that it may have been just mere trash, but was contemplating the countless numbers of causes and conditions which brought this little piece of paper into existence. He was contemplating on the source of the paper, on the countless number of conditions present for it to exist, right? The growing of the tree, the cutting of the tree, the process to make it into pulp and finally into paper. He was also looking beyond just the immediate material thing, looking at the nature of conditions, like the soil needed to plant the tree, the rain to water the tree. And of course, he was reflecting on the many people, the many hands involved to make that single piece of paper. He was using the piece of paper as a metaphor to make us more aware of our own lives, inviting us to awaken to the truth and accept responsibility for understanding that so many things and other people unconditionally support and sustain us, making our lives meaningful. And the truth of our limited finite existence, our impermanent nature, also awakens our appreciation of our life. We hear this every time at the end of On White Ashes, a letter written by Renyo Shonin, which we ritually read during funerals and memorial services. Renyo wrote, "By so understanding the meaning of death, impermanence, we come to fully appreciate the meaning of this life, which is unrepeatable and thus to be treasured above all else." I love the kancho. I love the power and breadth of the calling bell. And it's actually the first Dharma teaching we receive at the start of service, if we're present enough to hear it. It's the teaching of interdependence, impermanence, and deep hearing. I love the daikin. I love sitting next to it. I can feel the vibrations going through my body when it's struck. It takes a full 2 minutes for the sound to cease after being struck. It's reminding me to hear and live the teachings with my body as well as with my mind. I love the inking, the bright, full sound, beautifully counterpointing the stillness, calling us back to this present moment. I appreciate all these rituals of sound because I need these reminders and these invitations. I often forget to appreciate this moment and the causes and conditions of how and why I'm here. The Buddhist bells also invite us to participate in a very special practice, that of listening. In our Shin tradition, monpo, or deep hearing, plays a very important role. It's often been said that the Nembutsu's form is twofold. The Nembutsu is Amida's voice, boundless wisdom and compassion, calling to us. At the same time, it's our vocal response to that call. So whenever there's a Namo Amida Butsu, there is Amida. And wherever there is Amida, there is Namo Amida Butsu. Hearing the name is not merely hearing the sounds Namo Amida Butsu, but hearing immeasurable wisdom and compassion with our whole being, calling to us throughout timeless time. Thus, when I hear Amita's call in my innermost being, faith is awakened. And faith, which is none other than that of the entrusting heart, completes our oneness with immeasurable wisdom and compassion. A wonderful Dharma teacher, Chögyam Rinpoche, once said, "Praying is not about asking, it's about listening. It's just opening our eyes to see what was there all along." That's Namo Amida Butsu. That's the Nembutsu. I'd like to close my reflection with the words of Shinran Shonin, who's inviting us to hear that call of boundless wisdom and compassion, supporting and sustaining us always. Please join me in Gasho as we listen to Shinran's Wasan number 30 from Hymns of the Pure Land. Those who hear Amida Buddha's name with body and mind rejoice in it with reverence and praise. Receive its treasure virtues. The great benefit acquired with one utterance is supreme. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namandots. 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 It is my honor, privilege, and joy to invite our BCA Bishop, Reverend Kodo Umezu, to come forward and offer New Year's Day reflections. Sensei?